Summer 1940. The fate of Europe rested on a narrow strip of sea, the English Channel. Across it, in occupied France, the Luftwaffe assembled the greatest aerial armada the world had ever seen. Thousands of aircraft lined the runways, bombers gleaming under the sun, fighters coiled like predators. Their mission? Annihilate the Royal Air Force and clear the skies for invasion. For Hitler, Britain was the last obstacle to total domination. For the men of the RAF, it was the last defense of freedom itself. The battle that was coming would not be fought on land or sea, but in the air, where seconds meant life or death. In small airfields across southern England, young pilots waited in tense silence. The sound of engines in the distance made hearts stop. Across the Channel, German crews checked their bombs and maps, confident that victory would be swift. Neither side knew that they were about to fight the first great air campaign in history. One that would decide the future of civilization. At the height of its power, the Luftwaffe was unmatched. Its bombers, Heinkels, Dorniers, Junkers, were flying fortresses, escorted by sleek Messerschmitt Bf-109s that ruled the European sky. Their pilots were veterans of Poland and France, proud, disciplined, and convinced of inevitable triumph. They called their strategy Adlertag, the Day of the Eagle. The plan? Destroy Britain's airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories, paving the way for invasion. Under Göring's command, squadrons filled the morning air like steel locusts. From above the Channel, the German pilots saw a green island spread beneath them, beautiful, doomed. But what awaited them was not an easy conquest, but an invisible defense. Radar masts, rising from the cliffs, tracked their every move. Within minutes of crossing the coast, British fighters were airborne. The hunters had become the hunted. In narrow control rooms, lit by dim lamps, women of the WAAF plotted enemy raids with magnets on vast maps. Voices crackled through radios. "Scramble! Scramble!" Engines roared to life. Within minutes, the Spitfires and Hurricanes climbed into the clouds, sunlight flashing off their wings. They were boys, barely 20, facing seasoned Luftwaffe aces. But they had an advantage. They were fighting over home. When their fuel ran low, they landed, rearmed, and returned within minutes. For the Germans, a damaged plane meant capture or death. Above Kent, Dover, and the Channel, the air turned into a swirling storm of fire and vapor. Machine guns rattled, wings tore apart, parachutes blossomed. The sky itself seemed alive, a battlefield of steel and smoke. When the sun set, the RAF was bloodied, but unbroken. The Luftwaffe had struck first and failed to kill its prey. As days turned to weeks, Göring changed tactics. If the RAF would not die in the air, it would die on the ground. German bombers now targeted airfields, hangars, and fuel depots. Runways were cratered, towns around them destroyed. British pilots flew 3, 4, 5 sorties a day. Ground crews worked by flashlight, patching bullet holes and fueling planes under attack. Even civilians joined the fight. Farmers helped drag wreckage from fields. Children gathered shrapnel as souvenirs of survival. But every bomb that fell hardened the resolve of those it was meant to break. The Luftwaffe believed terror would bring surrender. Instead, it inspired resistance. The more London burned, the brighter its courage burned with it. August 1940. The sky over England had become a living inferno. Hundreds of aircraft clashed daily in duels of speed and instinct. Dogfights spiraled through the clouds. Chaos, precision, death in seconds. The Messerschmitts dove with blinding speed, but the Spitfires turned tighter, faster. Each pilot trusted his machine like a limb. One twitch too slow meant oblivion. Radio chatter filled the air. "Tally-ho! Bandits at 12 o'clock! Going in!" By dusk, the sky was littered with burning wrecks. Survivors limped home, fuel tanks empty, hearts hollow. But the RAF still flew. Britain's skies were scarred, but not conquered. And as the sun sank over Dover, a quiet truth settled across the channel. The island would not fall easily. While German bombers relied on brute force, Britain fought with science. Along its southern coast, towering antennae hummed in silence, the chain-home radar network. It was crude, experimental, but revolutionary. For the first time in history, a nation could see its enemy before the enemy saw it. Inside the control rooms, young women tracked blips across glowing maps. Their calm voices guided the RAF like an unseen hand. Bandits, Vector 180, Angels 15. Those few seconds of warning often meant the difference between victory and death. The Luftwaffe never truly understood radar's power. Goering dismissed it as British propaganda. But it was the backbone of the defense, invisible, unstoppable, unmatched. When German pilots wondered why the RAF always seemed to appear at the right moment, the answer stood quietly behind the cliffs, a network of towers that changed the future of warfare. The Luftwaffe had more planes, more men, more firepower. But Britain had something greater: information. And in the coming battles, that knowledge would save the nation. September 1940. The war reached the heart of Britain. Hitler, frustrated by slow progress, unleashed a new order: burn London to ash. That night, 348 bombers crossed the channel in waves, their engines droning like thunder. The sky glowed red. The Thames blazed like a river of fire. Families fled to the underground, turning stations into cities of the living and the terrified. Children slept beside rails, nurses bandaged wounds under flickering lights. Above them the bombs fell without mercy. Firefighters fought exhaustion, their silhouettes framed against walls of flame. The city's heartbeat was chaos. Sirens, explosions, courage. But even as London burned, the people refused to break. When dawn came, St. Paul's Cathedral stood untouched, a single dome above the ruin, gleaming through the smoke. It became the symbol of defiance. The Luftwaffe had turned the capital into a furnace, but not into surrender. From the ashes rose something stronger than steel: unyielding faith. Inside the Reich Air Ministry, Goering raged. He had promised Hitler that the RAF would be destroyed in weeks. Instead, British resistance was growing stronger. Fuel shortages plagued the Luftwaffe, and pilots complained of endless missions and impossible odds. German bombers flew farther and longer, their escorts forced to turn back before reaching targets. Once unchallenged aces now faced an enemy that learned faster, fought harder, and refused to die. The Spitfires and Hurricanes were fewer, but they fought like phantoms, appearing from clouds, vanishing into the sun. The Luftwaffe had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the enemy. They attacked Britain's spirit, not its strength. And the spirit could not be bombed into submission. As losses mounted, morale crumbled. Pilots began to question their leaders, their mission, their cause. The invincible air force that had crushed Europe was now bleeding to death over the English countryside. The eagles were falling. By September's end, Britain's skies had become a graveyard of heroes. Outnumbered, exhausted, and half-starved, the RAF still rose to meet every raid. They called themselves the Few, not out of pride, but out of grim reality. Their friendships were forged in minutes and ended in smoke. They flew 3, sometimes 4 sorties a day. Between missions, they slept on the ground beside their aircraft, faces streaked with oil and sweat. Every name painted on a Spitfire's fuselage carried a story. Some ended midair, others in silence. On the ground, WAAF controllers guided them through chaos. Mechanics worked through the night, patching wings with scrap metal and prayer. The nation watched from fields and rooftops, cheering the silver crosses overhead. Churchill's words echoed through every heart. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And indeed, these few carried the hope of the free world. October 1940. The battle had reached its breaking point. The Luftwaffe was running out of men, fuel, and faith. Each mission cost dozens of aircraft. Each victory felt hollow. In Germany, families received telegrams of loss once reserved for others. In Britain, the pattern shifted. The bombers that once roared in squadrons now came in scattered formations, desperate and disorganized. The RAF, once on defense, now hunted them, cutting through the night with vengeance in their engines. Over the Channel, flaming wrecks fell into the sea. German machines swallowed by the darkness they had brought. Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The invasion of Britain would never come. For the first time since the war began, the tide had turned against the Reich. The sky, once a weapon of terror, had become a fortress of freedom. And the men who defended it had rewritten the future. When the smoke cleared, the cost became visible. Over 40,000 British civilians were dead. Entire neighborhoods had vanished under the rubble. Yet through the silence of destruction came the unmistakable sound of survival, the hum of rebuilding, the laughter of children in bombed-out streets, the toll of church bells that refused to stay silent. In Germany, the defeat was unspoken but undeniable. The Luftwaffe had lost over 1,700 aircraft and thousands of its best men. Its reputation, once a symbol of invincibility, lay shattered among the wreckage scattered across England's fields. The world had witnessed something extraordinary. A small island nation had faced the most powerful air force on Earth and won. But victory was not triumph, it was exhaustion. The RAF's pilots were heroes, yes, but broken ones, eyes hollow, nerves frayed, hands trembling even in sleep. The battle had ended. The war had not. Winter came. The invasion barges rotted on the French coast, forgotten monuments to a conquest that never came. Yet, across the Channel, the war still raged. In the night skies, where bombers hunted cities instead of soldiers. London, Coventry, and Liverpool burned under the Blitz. Berlin would soon feel the same. The Luftwaffe had failed to break Britain, but not its will to fight. New bombers were built in secret. The RAF learned to strike back, across the Rhine, across Europe, across the heart of the Reich. The hunters became the hunted. For the airmen of both nations, the Channel became not a border, but a grave. Its waters held the wreckage of men and machines from both sides, enemies in life, equals in death. And above them, the sky, eternal, indifferent, watched silently. The Battle of Britain changed warfare forever. It was the first campaign fought entirely in the air, where strategy was measured not in miles, but in minutes. It proved that radar, intelligence, and morale could outweigh numbers and steel. And it revealed that courage, true courage, was not the absence of fear, but the mastery of it. The Luftwaffe entered the battle as conquerors. They left as mortals. The RAF entered as defenders. They emerged as legends. Their duel over England became the blueprint for modern air power, for coordination, communication, and the unity of science and spirit. Every flight since, from Korea to Ukraine, carries echoes of that first great sky war. Every pilot who looks down through the clouds at his homeland carries the legacy of 1940, of those who fought so the world could breathe free air. Long after the last dogfight ended, the stories of those who flew remained. The German pilots, proud, skilled, and doomed by arrogance, remembered the endless waves of Spitfires that came out of nowhere. The British pilots, weary and scarred, remembered friends who vanished into smoke and the unbearable quiet that followed victory. In hangars, mechanics kept pieces of shot-up aircraft as relics. WAF officers, once voices in the dark, faded into civilian life, uncelebrated but never forgotten. And in homes across Britain, photographs of the boys stood on mantels, young faces frozen in their finest hour. History would call them heroes. They called themselves lucky. They did not fight for glory. They fought because there was no one else left to fight. Today, the sound of a Merlin engine still brings people to tears. At air shows across England, restored Spitfires soar once more, their wings shining in the sun, their shadows gliding over green fields that once burned with war. Children look up in awe. Veterans look up in remembrance. The Luftwaffe versus RAF. It was more than a battle of planes. It was a battle of wills, of ideals, of humanity itself. It proved that freedom is not given. It is earned, fought for, and defended, even at the edge of annihilation. As Churchill said, "If the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour." And above the quiet English countryside, where the contrails once wrote history in the clouds, the sky remains free because they fought for it.